Challenger Kevin Virgil has made proposed carbon capture pipelines a central part of his campaign. They could run right through the 4th Congressional District. He's opposed eminent domain for the pipelines being used, which is a state issue. But he's also opposed to federal tax credits for the pipelines, which is something Congressman Randy Feenstra worked to pass. We came across handfuls of photo albums out in this field that you see behind me. We were able to get those to a neighbor who could get those back to their owners. On the first day back from winter break, the lives of the community were shattered by a 17-year-old student turned gunman.
I prefer to vote early, and I'll also be working on Election Day, so I figured let's go ahead and knock it out. So let's start a timer and see how long this takes.
Is Trump bluffing? Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley told reporters that he's concerned about the impacts of a potential trade war, but thinks Trump may be using it as a bargaining chip. Iowa law currently bans drivers from texting when they're behind the wheel. But a bill in the Iowa Senate would ban drivers from using their phones entirely while driving unless it's in a hands-free or voice-activated mode. And for drivers who still violate the law, the cost of the ticket would increase from $45 to $100.
This bill needs to be passed so badly.
Judy Kalora's daughter Christina was killed by a distracted driver in Iowa City in 2023.
He got in her car, went out into the intersection, and was hit broadside by a driver who was speeding and texting.
Berta Pearson of Mount Pleasant feels her pain. Her grandson, Pearson Franklin, was killed while working on a construction project on the Illinois side of the Great River Bridge. The woman who was driving was also found guilty of killing his co-worker in the crash.
She was on her phone. She was speeding. She was going to be a nurse to save lives, and she took 2 that day.
Kalora says she's hopeful it becomes law and says it would prevent families from experiencing grief like hers.
This is a bill that we really need for education. We need it so that other people don't have to die and other people don't have to go through the grief.
Hands-free legislation comes up yearly during the legislative session, but it never gets passed by both chambers of the legislature. In her condition of the state address last week, Governor Kim Reynolds told lawmakers to send a bill to her desk.
For the sake of all our loved ones on the road, let's finally pass legislation that requires drivers to keep their eyes on the road and away from their phones.
In a subcommittee Wednesday, lawmakers took the first step to send the bill to her desk when they approved the bill's advancement unanimously. At the Iowa State Capitol, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.
We call it shoulder-to-shoulder missions.
Shir Agasafi, a former Afghan military intelligence officer, served alongside U.S. forces.
It's a unique bond that was made between Afghan and American forces like brothers, and they get up in the morning and they fight for the same goal.
Safi fled Afghanistan when the government fell to the Taliban in 2021.
I knew they will sentence me to the death, and there is not any chance for me to live among those people anymore. These are their names.
Safi left Afghanistan a day before the suicide bomber attack at the Kabul airport during the U.S. withdrawal from the country. The soldiers who helped him escape died.
They are the people who lost their lives to save my life.
Safi now runs Afghan Partners in Iowa, which helps refugees resettle. When he first arrived, local nonprofits helped with jobs, education, and housing.
No one is going to make a lease agreement with you because you don't have any kind of record. And the big thing, you don't have money to pay deposit and rent.
That funding to assist refugees in their first 90 days in the U.S. is now on hold because of an executive order signed by President Donald Trump.
Right now in Iowa, there are 891 refugees who are here in our state. In that 90-day period, 445 of those are kids. So that means that now there is absolutely no funding for them to have food, housing, any of their basic needs met.
Democratic State Senator Sarah Trone Garriott has introduced a bill that would take $2.5 million from the state's general fund and direct it to the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services. HHS would then distribute it to nonprofits that help refugees.
We can't turn our backs on these folks. And if the federal government can't keep its promises, then Iowans need to step up.
Safi says most of the Afghan refugees coming to Iowa served alongside U.S. forces, and he thinks it's an ethical duty to help them. He hopes his fellow Iowans share his sentiment. In Des Moines, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.
All right, 3rd Platoon, I'm Lieutenant Pitts. Your PL for this mission.
Deep in the woods of central Minnesota, the Iowa National Guard is getting ready.
This is our north, south, east, and west.
Right now, about 5,000 National Guard soldiers from 8 states are undergoing intense, realistic training at Camp Ripley. This year is tougher than last year.
We're training them for combat, not because of anything that's going on in the world, but this is part of their normal training rotation.
The training soldiers at Camp Ripley are doing is called Exportable Combat Training Capability, or XCTC. Army leadership wants them to practice real-life scenarios against an enemy. This is where the mortars are held here at Camp Ripley, and later tonight, these men will begin an offensive mission.
Fire!
Specialist Seth Wilhelm of Dubuque says they're getting to practice with live rounds, something they don't often get to do back home.
It's hard to really understand how those missions work out when we are not using live rounds, but when we're using live rounds, it feels more like real.
Not everyone is in the infantry. Even soldiers whose job it is to prepare food have been sent to get realistic field training.
It's very different from drill, where we're just in the actual kitchen serving people, but here we have to set all of our stuff up in the field and it's a whole different environment. It's hot outside, it can be rainy, but here it's actually been pretty good so far.
Captain Tim Hadley of Old Wine is a chaplain. He says the conditions aren't always forgiving.
The mosquitoes, or small birds that we call them here, sometimes it'd be a little bit much. You're in the field 4 or 5 days. I haven't showered since last Tuesday.
While this year's training is tough, next year the intensity is getting taken up and the stakes will be higher. Members of the Iowa National Guard are heading to Louisiana, where they'll have to work with more units and companies from other states against more challenging scenarios. In Little Falls, Minnesota, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.
Really feel the stretch.
Coach Liang Chow is meticulous.
Shoulders open.
Chow has taught gymnastics here in West Des Moines, Iowa for the past 21 years. One of his first students was Sean Johnson.
From 6 years old to 16 years old, Olympic champion.
Johnson won 4 medals at the 2008 Olympics, one of them gold on the balance beam. During practice, Chow made her do her routine over and over again to make sure it was flawless.
You know, everybody thinks Olympic Games is fun, but it's fun to watch on TV, but really actually doing it is a lot of work.
Though Johnson competed in the Summer Olympics in Beijing 16 years ago, she's still someone this current generation of gymnasts look up to.
And she definitely, like an older team sister, set up a good example that promoting the younger generations to look up to her.
There are pictures of Johnson's biggest moments on display all over the gym. Same for Gabby Douglas, another gymnast Chow turned into an Olympic champion.
Sean, Gabby, and then like all the Olympians and the college gymnasts that have worked so hard to get to where they are now.
6th grader Hadley Clark hopes to make it on this wall one day too.
Because I feel like it would be really fun to be able to do all that big stuff and then be able to come back and be like, oh my gosh, you're her.
Johnson's success has brought Olympic and collegiate hopefuls from all over to Iowa. High school senior Addison Ward is from Canada and followed her cousin to Chow's gym.
So I actually moved by myself. Yeah, when I was 10, or 11, sorry. And I moved here by myself and lived with Carly and her family. And then over COVID, my parents eventually moved down here. I mean, it's a hub for good gymnastics. Chow knows how to produce good gymnasts like Sean and Gabby.
Chow says they couldn't have taken home the gold if it weren't for the community.
There is a lot of help. For example, parents and our community, our wonderful people, that's all behind us to put the tremendous results to take it home.
While very few can become Olympic champs, Chow says the most important thing he can train his students on is to become leaders.
Follow your leader.
In West Des Moines, Iowa, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.